Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Cryptic Humility. I am here today with our guest speaker,
Joshuadbold.
Josh. Thank you so much for coming to Cryptic Humility. We are excited to have you. I am thrilled to talk about my background with Josh because on the podcast for the longest time, I have been talking about us doing live interviews in Boston. We finally got around to doing that about 2 weeks ago, and Josh was actually one of the first people that I interviewed on the street in Boston. So after talking a little bit about his experience, my experience, we connected on LinkedIn. Thankfully, Josh has been open to coming onto the podcast to answer some questions and just talk to us about his experience in the market, how he evolved in crypto. So without further ado, I'm going to pass this off to Josh. He can answer some questions about how he got into crypto, where he went to school, where he grew up, and just basically his general history. So without further ado, Josh, take it away.
Sounds good. Thanks, Vanessa. So I probably have a similar story to a lot of people that are interested in like meme coins and stuff like that. I first got interested in the crypto space around 2020, 2021 when like GameStop was a big thing. And from there, crypto was also really hot. Lots of opportunities there, a lot of mania, euphoria. And so I kind of like got really into it, got really in the weeds trying to figure out what the opportunities were, because to me, I was like, there's a lot of opportunities here. I see them. I see people's lives changing, but I also know that things can't just be too good to be true. And I wanted to really understand what crypto was, what Bitcoin was, what all the altcoins and other stuff in the space were, what the deal was. So the first sort of year or so of crypto for me was just gambling, making a bunch of money, losing a bunch of money, and then taking the rest of the sort of years after that to really keep learning, keep researching, and eventually I figured things out. And I was working during that time at a crypto research fund where I was able to get a lot of sort of insights into the space, into exchanges and other sort of institutional players, which was helpful. And over time, I think I've developed a better network that has kind of let me become sort of a self-sufficient, I guess, trader slash researcher slash angel investor type player. That's pretty much my history. I think a lot of people that were around in this space in 2021 can kind of relate to that, because a lot of them, I think, got drawn in from meme coins. But I think a lot of people, where they sort of mess up is when they, when the money goes away and it's harder to sort of stay engaged, they kind of get, I had a lot of friends that sort of disappeared from the space that I used to research crypto and like learn about it with, who aren't really here anymore. And I kind of just continued that journey by myself. So yeah.
So would you say that in your experience in crypto, in the crypto market, that you are primarily self-taught?
I think so, yeah, because I mean, crypto is a very, I've looked at different books and stuff like that claim to have sort of insights into crypto and like what you should do, what you shouldn't do, what you should buy. But it's like, realistically, I think crypto moves way too quickly and is adapting and changing
Rapidly.
month basis. So it's very hard to not, if you don't teach yourself and you don't keep up with the industry and sort of digest things in real time, you're going to fall behind and you're not going to really understand where the market is heading and where the industry is sort of going to, which is, I mean, I was at the Bitcoin conference just a few weeks ago for that reason, because I think it's really important to just, take as many opportunities as possible to really just know what's going on and what is important to sort of the market movers in the space and the industry leaders.
100%. And so that's interesting because our last guest speaker that we just had on, you guys have a lot of similarities in regards to being more so self-taught in your own research, specifically kind of looking into meme coins. But I wanted to ask you to kind of backtrack because I think your history is really cool. But did you want to tell people where you're from and where you are now?
Oh, yeah, sure. So I'm born and raised in Las Vegas. I went to the University of Nevada, Las Vegas from there, I graduated college last year. After that, I was still sort of trading, doing my own thing, and I was really looking for sort of a different setting. I wanted to be, I guess, a change of scenery. So I moved over here to Boston, and I've been really enjoying the East Coast. So
Yeah, woo, Boston.
yeah.
I just like sharing that because obviously we had our live interviews and that's how we met, and then figuring out your
Mhm.
history was really cool. So I want to ask to kind of clarify for everybody, what are you specifically doing in the crypto space now? Like, are you still investing your time into meme coins, or have you like diverged off that? Like, where are you in the space now?
So I I think this is always an interesting question for me because I do primarily, I'd say maybe like 70% of my attention usually goes to meme coins on like a weekly basis. But that's mostly because that is where the volatility is, that is where the attention is. And for me, I honestly I've talked about this ad nauseum with like a lot of my friends in the space. I really wish that there were more sort of traditional institutions and more like bigger players from outside of the space getting into the space and like sort of building more infrastructure that people can be excited about, specifically like retail sort of traders or investors that are looking for something to buy, that they can actually have some sort of upside on. But I mean, this is something I think that most people sort of overlook, and it's that Bitcoin is it's really hard to beat Bitcoin. And so what ends up happening is that meme coins are really, I mean, they're just speculation. And, so it's sort of the most primitive possible vehicle for just pure speculation. So I'm not super, I wouldn't say it's a good thing for the space, but it's sort of a function of where the industry's sort of current innovations are. There's not really a lot going on. I mean, there's a lot going on with stable coins and like new protocols like Polymarket and stuff like that, but there's not really like a big DeFi boom or something like that happening right now that people can sort of forget about meme coins and go and buy into real tech, which I think just goes to kind of highlight how much of the market is dominated by Bitcoin and how much Bitcoin is sort of the driver for a lot of what goes on in crypto, that I think people kind of underestimate that. So
Yeah, I can see that too, like how a lot of people, well, and the thing is that there are a lot of issues in the crypto market, which is why we're here today. We meet with people to try to discuss what those issues and opportunities are and try to get answers for people that are lost in the market. And I do think there are a lot of conflicting ideas about meme coins, and you're right that a lot of the time they can just be speculation, but they also have a lot of volatility. So if you're looking for opportunity, especially if you're into day trading, you like to like hold for short term, like meme coins can be a huge opportunity. So our last guest speaker that we had on had very conflicting ideas about meme coins based off his research. So I
mhm.
actually thought it would be interesting to bring you on to kind of give a second opinion and kind of hear from you why why be involved in meme coins. And to start that conversation, I wanted to ask you if I myself am interested in creating a meme coin. Let's say I have a business and I have this meme coin concept, what are the steps that I could take to either like create a meme coin or like be in that space?
um well, I think creating a meme coin and just being in the meme coin space are two very different things. I think a lot of it really boils down to sort of who's behind the price movements. So I'd say for the vast majority of people, just as a sort of disclaimer, I would not recommend trying to create a meme coin. But with that said, there have been, that I'm aware of, there have been many instances of people on Pump Fund creating, creating tokens just about random events that sort of get what people call a community takeover, where they will find a certain coin that has a little bit of natural momentum, sort of get a group of people in that see a vision of, sending that thing to some higher, much
Ground.
higher market cap or whatever, and people will try to sort of gather a community around that. And so those were doing very well for a while. So you could, if you are the type of person that just likes to, not looking for, just wants to kind of mess around, you can always go on Pump Fun and create a meme coin of your own for free. And it's like, so I think that is sort of an issue though, because it's very much lowered the barrier to entry for creating a meme coin. So now there's a lot of people that are just looking to extract money out of people that are gambling on a random token. But to your point though, if you want to just be involved in that space, I mean, there's varying levels of involvement you can have. There are people that will choose to, let's say, take like $100 and try to put $5 or $10 into a bunch of random coins on Pump.fun as soon as they come out, and just kind of use it as like a slot machine sort of, and see if anything will 100x or 1000x, and and it happens all the time. So you might get lucky, but at the end of the day, I think a lot of those people sort of end up usually losing it. So I personally don't really stay in that realm. Where I usually prefer to sort of get an edge is, I would usually prefer to kind of try to figure out which coins have asymmetric amount of attention being driven to them, whether that can be through an influencer, that can be through some news event, that can be, anything like that. And then depending on who is involved with the coin, and then, like what the price action has been, like, is this coin up 10,000% in the past day, or is this sort of just chilling and finding a floor? So if you're able to suss it out and figure out which coins have a lot of sellers waiting to sell and which ones are kind of just waiting for liquidity to come back into them, then I think that's kind of where I try to be when it comes to being involved with meme coins.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And the last person that we had on was saying that a lot of people that create meme coins at times are doing so for their own self-interest or their own benefit. Do you agree with that, or do you think that the spaces could be different?
No, I 100% agree. I think anyone that tries to say that meme coins are not like I don't want to really say value extraction vehicle, but that's pretty much what they are. And you could argue that there are the casinos, like actual casinos in Vegas, are sort of the same thing. People want to gamble, people want to play the game, and the casino always wins, and everyone that goes to this casino knows that, and they make a ton of money doing it. People are, at the end of the day, people are for sure going to lose money. So it's like, in that sense, it's sort of a value extraction vehicle. I think if you look at it that way, and you look at the people creating coins as being nothing more than casino operators, and they're trying to basically make money off of people who want to speculate and gamble, then I think it just comes down to, is how much of the people benefiting from whichever meme coin you're trading, how much of that is the house, which is whoever the insiders and people that created are, and how much of that is real people, organic momentum, organic attention from other people that are just kind of letting it do its thing. And how much of that is, on the flip side, there are coins that are, people will call them farms, that are just, people, basically insiders just dumping everything into the intention that they are trying to get, and then not really allowing any room for natural sort of trading. And it's really just a pump and dump in usually like a day. So I think kind of finding a middle ground, if you can do that, is, it's still gambling, but at least if you like the odds and you think the odds make sense and you feel like you can win the game, so to speak, and there's money to be made, then I think that's a game that some people play and have been very successful doing. So
Yeah, absolutely. And would you consider getting involved in meme coins comparable to, I guess, day trading? Would day trading meme coins be a benefit? because since the market is so volatile, really the price swings aren't guaranteed in the long term. Is that, I guess I'm asking, is that how you approach the meme coin market when you're trading, or?
Well, so I think the difference between meme coins and kind of just crypto in general and day trading, I mean, when it comes to day trading, you're basically competing against, like, if you're trading options, there are hundreds of hedge funds, probably thousands of hedge funds actually, that are really, they've perfected the art of basically pricing options, pricing stocks, predicting, being able to extract money from the market from more or less people that are less advanced than them. So in my personal, I don't really have any experience day trading, and I think there's a lot of different avenues of that. But I think generally speaking, it's a much more advanced market, and there's a lot more advanced participants in that market. So I think that makes it a lot more difficult to really find an edge. But the thing is, in meme coins, is that most of the actors in the space are very, very inexperienced, which I personally think, if you are, I mean, obviously that makes them susceptible to like a lot of scams and rugs and stuff. But I mean, if you look at like Trump coin, for example, I mean, I think a lot of people that bought it towards the top were very sort of not too happy with the way that it's playing out right now. But if you were one of the people that was there when it was in the first few hours, right? I mean, in crypto terms, 2 or 3 hours to see something of with that kind of potential upside is kind of unheard of. So like, you could say that being a day trader and sort of focusing 100% on finding those sorts of opportunities could be beneficial. And I mean, if obviously I'm cherry picking a little bit, but there are other smaller but similarly easy to execute on opportunities that come about from time to time. So I think a lot of it just depends on how good you are at identifying those opportunities and actually taking advantage of them, because I think they are there. I just don't really, I don't think a lot of people, especially from like outside of the crypto space or just TradFi in general, private equity, hedge funds, whatever, like a lot of them just don't really understand where or why things move the way they do in the crypto space. So I think if you understand it, then I think it's, I think there are winners and losers, but you definitely, I think it's a lot easier to be a winner, in my opinion, in the crypto space as an individual trader than it is to be, a winner in when you're competing against hedge funds and quantitative market makers and stuff.
Right. So you're claiming that there's just a lot more opportunity here, but the issue is that there's a lot of lack of education. So there's a lot of self-research that needs to happen to be able to understand these concepts and what, like, the backing of meme coins and those kinds of things. So you've been trading for a long period of time. We're here to talk and help the beginners in the market. Obviously, I'm not a pro. I've never traded hardcore meme coins. Like, that's why we have you on. So what is your advice to people that are getting into the market, that are interested in these things? Like, what are your top 3 things that you've experienced, maybe some of your own mistakes? What can you say here to help people that are just beginning?
I think that's a good question. And I think it's difficult to answer because everyone has their own sort of edge. Some people, their edge is that they have a lot of time that they're willing to risk, whether it's just being 24/7 focused on finding information, gathering information, making connections, trying to find some piece of alpha to trade on. That in itself is an edge. And so I think knowing what your edge is in any market, not just crypto, but specifically in crypto, is an important thing, because a lot of people will try to, like, they just want to follow someone and not really understand why something's going to move or why they're going to see a return, and they just kind of want to follow the wind or whatever, wherever they're getting their tip from. So,
and actually, if I can interrupt really quickly, that's exactly what happened to me. So I got involved in this huge group. This person messaged me over social media. She lived in Hawaii, and This is when I was FX day trading, and she got me involved in AI software that can do passive trades for you. And I think the community aspect, but also the get rich quick mentality that a lot of people get sucked into with meme coins causes a lot of confusion, because my mentor basically sold me on the idea of making quick passive money. But what had happened is that that whole company that was selling the artificial intelligence software was a huge scheme and scam, because it was just an affiliate program. So it was just a huge pyramid scheme.
Yeah.
So that, unfortunately, a lot of people, the community aspect around meme coins is very intriguing. There's a lot of social benefits in that. Just like, humor and have a sense of belonging and community in the younger generation. Meme coins can kind of fill a lot of people's, I don't know, attention and interest because it's new and buzzing. And our last guest kind of phrased it as it's sexy. It's a sexy way to make money instead of getting involved in like crypto ETFs and stuff like that. So I agree. It's a very hard question, and there's no real definitive answer right now because the market is still evolving. This is all still new concepts. But so is there anything else you wanted to say before I ask you something else?
Well, I'll just say on that, I think the most important thing to realize specifically with meme coins, and even I'd say as far as like any altcoin in crypto, is that, in my opinion, with very few exceptions, most of the time, unless there's some sort of cash flow or some sort of hard backing, you're not really making an investment. You're really just kind of gambling on what the people involved with that altcoin or meme coin or whatever are going to do with their tokens and what their best interest is or what their best interests are. That's why I think just kind of going up the ladder to, not to like compare it to a pyramid scheme, but like figuring out like who is at the top and how they stand to benefit, and kind of trying to piece together how that's going to happen and how you can personally benefit from it is sort of, that's the game that I like to play. And that's the game that I think people should understand that they're playing. Because, you can't really invest in a meme coin because it's not inherently an investment. There's nothing to invest in. It's really more of a lottery ticket that could pay out or it could not. So I'd say like being willing to understand that and to really understand that you're not investing, you're kind of playing a game that a lot of people are playing these days, even with like meme stocks or whatever. Understanding that is probably a good way to avoid getting yourself in a lot of trouble, because a lot of things, especially, there's a saying that they have, the best investments usually look the worst to buy. They look the riskiest, and the riskiest investments usually look like the safest ones to buy. So I'd say especially in crypto, that can be true a lot of the times, where stuff that seems to be safe is really not, with the exception of Bitcoin. I think people just need to understand that, really.
Absolutely. That's great. That's a great answer. And that's what we're trying to solve here, is we're trying to teach people, but the space is so cluttered right now with people getting lost in those kind of ideals. So it's important to have people like you stand up and speak about these things as you're experienced and you've been in the market for a period of time, and you truly have a deep idea of how these things work, to try to help people understand what they're getting involved with, as you've said. So with that in mind, I'm kind of putting you on the spot with this, but what are some meme coins that you are investing in right now? Or what are some that you're looking into that you think are worth investing into?
Yeah. I think it's actually a great question, because I think right now is actually an interesting time, because there's a few coins that I've been trading that are, just to put it bluntly, in my opinion, being manipulated. And it's not manipulation in like a one day pump and dump kind of thing, but in sort of a longer term, going up for a whole month until people finally feel like they need to go out and buy it, something like that, or whenever they decide to get it listed on exchanges and sort of push it to people to be their exit liquidity. And so I'll kind of give like sort of a background on these three, that because I think they're all sort of doing a similar thing. So there's three that I've been really focused on. One of them is Kita, which is sort of a layer one that is, I think the easiest way to describe it is that they're trying to be a super fast, high TPS transactions per second blockchain that can kind of compete with like Solana and even like credit card processors like Visa and stuff like that, which is like almost $1 trillion company. So that sort of narrative for me is something that I think is really powerful. It's something that people are going to understand. It's something that they can sign it kind of. It seems tangible to them because they can compare it to Visa or they can compare it to like other layer ones that are at a higher valuation. I think it's trading around 300 million right now, and so I've owned some since around 100 million, and I think it's probably going to go higher just because I think there are some really, really big players with deep pockets involved with it. And I think my personal sort of thesis on it is that, I mean, they've been buying up a lot of the coin for the past couple of maybe like 3 months. And so, it's been kind of impressive to watch. And I think there have been a lot of instances where stuff like that happens, but it can also be risky, like Luna or stuff like that from last cycle that had really impressive gains, but then crashed. So that's an altcoin, probably one of my favorite altcoins right now, just because it's been performing the best. So there haven't really been any other alts like that. So that one just stuck out to me. I'll give like a smaller one. There's a coin called Aura right now that has that sort of just teleported overnight from 1 million or over a couple nights to around 200 million. I think the reason for that is kind of the same thing, that have a large audience following them, whether that be mainstream sort of influencers that are not crypto related or non-mainstream influencers or like niche crypto influencers or whatever. They have that and they have a lot of money. And I'm pretty sure you can maybe look these guys up. They're called Cryptonary. So it's like crypto NARY. They're like a research company, which, I mean, they've been involved with SPX and some of the other like Popcat, some of the other bigger coins. And so I think, my assumption is that they are, these guys I know play sort of a game where they buy up a ton of a coin on, because it's a relatively small liquidity pool, they kind of just pump the price up a ton. And then we'll just get exchange listings where they can sell it onto people because they have a way bigger audience that way, of people that just go onto Coinbase or onto Binance or onto whatever, Kraken, whatever, and they just go on there to find stuff to buy. And if something's going up, then people will sometimes just buy it, especially because it's easier to them. So that's kind of my thesis on it and why I try to trade stuff on chain and kind of look for those market movers that are trying to, I mean, they are kind of just pump and dumping their coin. But if my thesis is correct and they are going for those Binance listings or those other tier one, like maybe Bybit or whatever listings, then maybe it goes up another 2 or 3x from when it gets listed. Then it goes up another 2 or 3x. And then, whatever at that point is probably when I'm going to be wanting to just sell and move on. So that's usually how a lot of things go in crypto. And I think people that I think I'm kind of going on a tangent here, but I know you mentioned like, what do I think about Coinbase and like trading on other exchanges versus trading on a DEX or trading on chain? I think there's a lot more manipulation on chain that can be good and bad. But, the asymmetric upside, insane 100x, 1000x sort of gains are always going to be on chain. And that's always going to be sort of the source where you can find some alpha, so to speak. Whereas on exchanges, even like Coinbase or Binance or Kraken or Bybit or whatever, most of the time, anything that's listed there that's new is going to just really just insiders looking for exit liquidity, to be completely honest, because it's a private closed network where they can sell without people looking at who's selling specifically, like a wallet or whatever. And so that lets them kind of obfuscate it, use their market makers to keep the price up and scale out through that volume. So that's, I think there's much fewer opportunities on like centralized exchanges. And so like I think really unless you're trading like, top 10 cryptocurrencies, I'd say anything else that you're trading on a centralized exchange is kind of just, you're probably someone's exit liquidity. So that's personally my take.
Yes, I'm glad you said that, because when we pre-met, I was talking about how I don't want to say trade on Coinbase, but I
Yeah.
hold my assets on Coinbase
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I'm not in the meme coin space, and I'm
Yeah.
only
That's perfectly
investing.
fine.
Yeah, I'm only investing in the top coins and holding for long term and seeing where they end up, like
Yeah.
Bitcoin, Ethereum, and stuff like that. So, but it's so good to mention that, because if you actually want to be in the space, should you be on Coinbase, is that going to be holding you back? So, I want to backtrack really quickly for people
Mhm.
that don't know. So, you mentioned Pump Fund. Can you explain to people what that is?
Yeah, of course. So Pump Fund is basically a platform where anyone can go there, connect their wallet, create a sort of idea, like type in the name, type in the ticker, upload an image, and even buy some of the coin before it's created. So let's just say, you want to like, creating a meme coin is, or creating a coin in general is kind of not an easy thing to do. In the past, you've needed liquidity, you've needed an audience that will buy it, you've needed some sort of distribution and some sort of momentum, you've needed like usually exchange listings so that people can trade it. If you're just a random market participant, that can be difficult to do or difficult to sort of get access to. So what Pump Fund has done now is they've kind of eliminated most of those barriers and made it so that they handle everything. It's all automated. All you really need to do is kind of just create the ticker, create the coin, buy however much of it you want, and just wait and see if anything happens. And so in the really early days, this was good because you knew for a fact that it wasn't going to be a rug. You knew for the fact, well, a rug in the sense that they can remove the liquidity or something like that, since it's automated by Pump Fund, so they can't really tamper with it. It can't be like a scam where you can't sell it or something like that. And so the price is either going to go up or down, which is at the end of the day what people are expecting when they come into the meme coin casino. They either expecting the price to go up or down or whatever. So it's, you could say it's more fair than having like like on Ethereum, sometimes there are malicious contracts that you can buy. So you need to be very careful and like research, or at least you used to need to do that. Make sure you're interacting with a legitimate contract and not something that's going to like they call it a honeypot, where only the dev can sell and you can't sell, stuff like that, where you're just outright getting scammed. Pump Fund was good for a very long time because it gave security and made it easier for people to access meme coins. But I think at this point, there's probably a few thousand coins at least per day being created on Pump Fund. And so there is sort of an imbalance between Pump Fund being good because it makes the process more streamlined, but also a little bit too simplified in the sense that quality's kind of gone out the window. So there's a mix with Pump Fund.
I love that you said meme coin casino.
Yeah.
That's like, it's such a good concept to like paint a picture to people of what they're getting involved with. And I've never heard anybody kind of reference that before, so that was really good. I'm only going to ask you a couple more questions. That was a really good take. The second to last question that I have is, obviously Discord is a really popular place for people to be in groups talking about market moves and stuff like that. Not to say it's connected to crypto per se, but it's just a well-known community.
Yeah.
Are there other communities to be talking, like either internationally or not even necessarily just about meme coins, but are there spaces that you know about that might be good to get involved with for crypto?
Definitely. I mean, I think Twitter or X is probably the top place to find information that is public. There are lots of people posting about coins or following coins or different ways that you can kind of understand what's going on. Twitter is usually the first place that a company, or not a company, but like a project or a meme coin or whatever will post about their coin, especially if it's sort of a fair launch and they're not kind of gatekeeping their, the information. So you can usually, especially for like more legitimate projects, like I'll use Kita as an example, they post a lot of good information on there. They retweet people that are talking about the coin. They post threads about it, post kind of updates, stuff like that. So, or even for newer coins, you can kind of, if you follow someone that is smart, someone that is a good trader, you can see who's following what. So there's sort of a community aspect in that. Beyond that, though, Telegram is also pretty good for, I'd say, a lot of more sophisticated traders and researchers will use Telegram for creating bots, like trading bots and like trackers. There people have like channels where they'll post research and stuff like that. People have group chats where they discuss whatever it is about the space that they want to discuss. So I'd say Twitter, Telegram, and Discord are usually the main three things that people use. But just to expand, there's also for sure, like in terms of just purely information and research, there's also like, we're really more influence than research, I'd say. There's YouTube, Instagram, TikTok are all probably very influential. Me personally, I usually use those as, I don't say counter trade signals, but potential top signals if a lot of people on TikTok or a lot of people on Instagram or YouTube are making videos or whatever. That can sometimes mean that it's usually the sort of secondary, the sort of marginal buyer is usually on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. So I'd say the primary sort of initial buyers are all on Twitter, Discord, and Telegram. So there's two sort of, I think it's something to bring up. But if you're really looking for early alpha, like searching on Twitter and like Telegram groups are probably, at least for me, the best way to research.
Perfect. Yeah. And I think you're right about Instagram and TikTok and stuff like that with influencers, because that's where you can see where a lot of movement is going, especially with meme coins as well. Be very wary about taking advice from influencers, though. I have to preface that because of the podcast. So
100%.
Yeah, I would definitely be, if you're looking for education, I would say definitely X or Twitter, like you mentioned, or Telegram. Perfect. If you're looking for market movement and you're curious to a certain extent, I would say you might be able to find that information through like Instagram or TikTok and just see, especially with meme coins, because they're like a social attraction. And then obviously we have social media. That's where you might find movement as well. But obviously saying that very with a grain of salt, if you will. So
definitely.
So my last question is, where do you think the crypto market is ending up in the next 10 years? Do you think we're going to be more focused on DeFi? Do you think that blockchain is going to evolve further? Where do you see us being in the crypto space in the future? What do you hope for?
What I hope for and what I think is going to happen are two very different things. I'd say I'll start with things that I think are not guaranteed, but probably very likely. And that is mostly, I think Bitcoin is going to continue to grow a lot. I think Bitcoin has more upside than most people realize. And, people usually hear the term like Bitcoin maxi or like maximalist. And these guys are like they don't really know what they're talking about. They're kind of like, I want to go trade altcoins. I want to buy this, buy that. And I trade altcoins all the time. I trade plenty of meme coins. I completely get it, but I think it's really important to understand that trading and investing, putting your, having somewhere to put your money, when it comes to that disparity, I can't reiterate it enough that, Bitcoin really has a lot more upside than people probably realize in terms of being used as like a global sort of pristine collateral asset that is non-sovereign, sort of non-related to any political or government institution or anything like that. On top of Bitcoin, I think definitely it's also going to probably be, I think there's a good likelihood that the government will continue using it either as just a sort of thing to get people interested and just sort of being friendly to it, or on the more extreme aspect, I think there's a good chance they'll begin issuing bit bonds or something like that to sort of have a more reliable or sustainable way of buying Bitcoin and getting the country exposed to Bitcoin without just taking taxpayer money and buying it. So I think at this point in time, in my opinion, it's sort of a bipartisan issue because crypto benefits so many people, Bitcoin specifically. I think it's going to be a big part of politics over the next 5 years at least, maybe longer. And then outside of Bitcoin, outside of that sort of discussion, I think there's a lot of interesting things that are possible, but haven't really gotten to that exit velocity stage. Real world assets, for example, is something that has something that Larry Fink at BlackRock has talked a lot about, tokenizing the deed to your house and being able to, why does an intermediary need to take a huge cut out of selling your home when, we could theoretically have homes tokenized and just trade them on chain against stable coins? Like, there's no reason for that to not happen other than, there needs to be some framework for it. But I think it's very, very possible. So on top of that, Kita actually is something I like about them is that they are potentially getting ready to process a lot of stablecoin transactions and potentially partner with retail venues that will integrate with the network to sort of maybe not replace Visa, but maybe make the barriers to entry to people that can't directly operate with Visa kind of make it accessible to anyone. So I could see that being used a lot, especially if they can integrate with banks. Or I think DeFi is always great. I think there's sort of a concept that I brought up a little bit ago before this call, where I think Bitcoin it solves the store of value issue. I think that's a solved problem. I think DeFi and a lot of other altcoins are unsolved problems, but I think eventually they will be solved. And I think, if anything, actually, I think certain aspects of DeFi are sort of solved. Like Aave, for example, is sort of a solved puzzle. On-chain loans, anyone can put up collateral, take a loan out against it, and use it the same way that they would with a bank. So that's sort of a solved problem. That is either it's not exciting. It's a good thing, but it's just not it's not the new hot thing that has infinite upside. It's sort of priced. The market knows what its price is, at least right now. You can look into how that might change, but I think things like RWAs and more stablecoin adoption and other DeFi, like Hyperliquid has been a huge thing. Decentralized perps or decentralized options or whatever might come about in the future. Stuff like that is still remaining. It's still unsolved. We don't have decentralized solutions for those things, or perps we do, but RWAs, for example. So those things are still kind of have a lot of room to grow. And I think any of those sort of unsolved problems will eventually be solved in one way or another. And the question really is just which problem is going to be solved and be a $1 trillion market or a multi-$100 billion market, right? That's up to you or whoever is analyzing to decide. But I think there are for sure a lot of those problems waiting to be solved. And I think having more institutions in the space and having bigger names like some of the people working with Coinbase and building on the Base network is really interesting. And I think I sort of have some hope at this point in time that we'll see institutions and banks start partnering with crypto instead of sort of ignoring it. Maybe we'll be able to use stable coins in maybe I might be able to add that to my bank in a couple of years, or I might be able to. I think I heard something about other financial institutions like banks being able to custody crypto on behalf of their clients. So I could put Bitcoin directly in my bank rather than having to buy an ETF or something like that, but I can actually own the Bitcoin in my bank or something like that. So I think there's a lot of room for growth still. It might not be as sexy as meme coins and as fun, but there definitely is going to be a lot of growth.
I agree with a lot of what you said. I like a lot of what you said, especially how crypto might might become or be still more political. I know World Liberty Financial is out, like the DeFi
Mhm.
project too, with Trump's sons and stuff. So that 100%. I've also done research in Visa, and I know that Visa was looking into Solana's blockchain for a period of time for payment processing. So that aligns too with what you said. And absolutely, I think DeFi is always going to be a thing. We our age, we've evolved with it, so
Mhm.
we're more accustomed, and I guess I would say more amazed by the changes that DeFi is taking, like compared to when we were in our childhood and we didn't even have like iPhones and stuff. So
Yeah.
we really are the generation that is building it, but also like watching it grow in our own waking life. So I agree with what you said. I think everything you said was incredibly insightful, especially with maybe more government involvement. And actually, what I was going to mention to you is my next guest speaker has a business startup in crypto. And I believe that he's trying to create a blockchain. Don't quote me on this. He's coming on the show. But I believe he's trying to create a blockchain where banks are going to be involved. Bank deposits are going to be involved, and like transactions are going to be confirmed with banks. So definitely he's coming on next Monday. And obviously I'm going to be doing my research before I meet with him. But
Mhm.
I believe that's kind of the general gist. So definitely a good episode to check out if you're curious. But obviously you can
Definitely.
always do,
Yeah.
yeah,
We'll
obviously you can
definitely
always
look
do
out
your
for it.
good, yeah. And you can always do your own research. Clearly you've come so far on your own research, and we appreciate your insight. I know many people that watch are going to appreciate your insight.
Very much looking forward to seeing some of the future guests that you have on the podcast, because I think there needs to be more discussion from people that are just in the financial industry, that are just normal people, not like the Larry Finks and the Brian Armstrongs and like the elites, but having just normal people discussing this stuff is awesome. So I mean, I was talking to someone the other day that works in private equity that was telling me that he has zero idea like anything about crypto. I mean, I don't really know much about private equity, so I get it, but like I think it would be great to have more people that just understand it without it being like this niche thing that's like still kind of separated from the rest of the traditional financial markets.
I really appreciate you saying that, because that's essentially what I'm trying to achieve. And
For
we
sure.
call it cryptic humility because it's about having conversations with people who might not know everything in the market, who might not be professionals, who might not have done the research, compared to people who have, that might be able to help those people and try to connect the dots from people that are missing information to people that have found it, and trying to
Mhm.
create a community where we can learn these things correctly, but also safely against all the scams, schemes, fraud, and things that kind of deteriorate the market, if you will. So I
For
really
sure.
appreciate you saying that. I will definitely link all your information. And if you guys have any questions, you can always comment below on Spotify. I believe you could do so on Apple, but also you can contact Josh directly too if you have questions over LinkedIn. So thank you so much for coming on. We will be on Cryptic Humility next Monday, and I hope to see you guys then. Thank you.